Alright, expect a long one today. Well, a long four, actually. See, I was leaving college yesterday, or rather packing up to leave, and so I did not make the two videos that were due yesterday. And of course, since I had two due today anyways, I figured, double it up, we're doing all four today. So let's start with one of mine, handling the compensation for the debt plan. Now, I've already talked about my plan to eventually pay off the debt, which involves cuts to and basically the abolition of many social programs. Of note, particularly are Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. But of course, you can't just abolish such things without expecting some financial backlash and economic changes. Quite a lot of them. So, naturally, in order to prevent the negative changes, some compensation is going to be necessary no matter what. So let's talk about that. The abolition of Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid necessarily means the elimination of many entitlements that people have become accustomed to. The populace is built around this, with the economy compensating for it naturally by essentially using it as just more money. This public spending, naturally, is a big part of the economy, both for the seniors who get the money, and of course the poor in the case of Medicare, but also in terms of stores, because after all, if you're buying something using your Social Security check, or Medicare or Medicaid if it's a medical procedure, then naturally you are going to receive that money, and so it becomes a part of the economy. But these are unsustainable social programs not built to function in the modern day, and so their elimination is necessary. But because of how entwined they are with the rest of the economy, compensation of some kind will be necessary both to ensure that poverty does not increase and to maintain the economy as it stands. Now, some poverty may increase due to other aspects of the debt plan. Remember, it's a massive shift in revenue dedicated basically entirely to paying off the debt. So, naturally, some poverty could be expected to increase. It's not a good thing, but it is still a possibility, and trying to minimize that is essentially what we're doing. That way the economy stays as stable as possible and allows for growth so that eventually the debt plan can speed up. First is the issue of Social Security, which will be replaced by an opt-out individual retirement fund. I don't know why I probably account is what I meant. But it'll be handled by the federal government rather than, say, Roth or whatever, which is usually handled by your employer. Payroll taxes for Social Security, both from the company and from the person, will go there instead. Investing in an IRA, which will invest in the stock market, thus generating money for you, which you can collect at a later date. This is more sustainable than Social Security's current model, which relies on population growth, which is not guaranteed nearly as much as economic growth is, especially with the following plan that I have. I've already addressed it in other videos. Feel free to watch the ones on how to pay off the national debt so I can explain that. But by having it be IRAs, not only is there actually an account that you can go to check on your money, and not just have it piled into one big pile and then distributed from there like Social Security, but it'll also help with the stock market. Remember, a lot of funds are being taken out because of the debt paying off. Because, of course, it involves a lot of decreases to expenditure and increases to taxation. But by investing in the stock market through these IRAs, it'll stabilize the economy, but also ensure a sustainable retirement for those in question. And as for those who are on Social Security currently, and evidence suggests are at risk falling into poverty should it be gone, they will necessarily have to be compensated, while those who are about to get on it will have their IRAs filled with roughly what they should have had should the IRAs have been implemented sooner. I do not have the rough numbers on this, but we can estimate maybe $2 trillion. Let's just use that as a rounding error. Medicare and Medicaid, meanwhile, would be abolished as well, which would also lead to compensation. Now, the estimate was about $29,000 to $30,000 per individual on these plans, and I got roughly $92 million on said plans, so that would be $1.5 trillion, which is roughly 2 years' worth of expenditures of said programs. So this would basically ensure that we'd pay about a year's extra in debt, which is unfortunate, but we would stabilize the economy while simultaneously reducing, again, a massive amount of expenditure. By the second year, we will not only have broken even on the Medicare and Medicaid situation, but we'll actually have a surplus relative to what we spent in this compensation. Same with Social Security. 2 years, by then, it will have already paid for itself. It's an abolition. While the IRAs simultaneously secure the economy so that things can grow on their own. Now, do I believe in universal IRAs? Not necessarily. Frankly, I'd prefer if everyone did it on their own. However, as long as there are people who don't invest by choice, this will likely need to be an option, especially during the initial stages of paying off the debt. Because until you have the economy fully figured out, people are going to be poor just because of how the government's set up. So this will be necessary in the interim period until taxation can be effectively abolished. And of course, this compensation would delay the debt elimination plan by roughly a year, but it would stabilize the economy and GDP, allowing for the following years to be more effective. Remember, the entire point of taxation by percentage of GDP is the idea that you're taking so much of the economy, using it to pay the debt off, and then slowly but surely continuing until it's completely gone. Now, my estimate is about 6 to 7 years. 6 to 7, more or less. And as such, adding in the year would make it roughly 7 to 8. But through this plan, we can ensure that it actually remains within that time period, because there's a very real risk without such compensation that instead what happens is the GDP takes a nosedive, causing a massive, hard to recover recession, and then we're stuck there delaying the debt plan by many more years. This is basically a way to stabilize the economy so that the debt plan can actually roll out within the planned time period. It's essentially a way to compromise while simultaneously ensuring that the debt plan can actually work. That is the whole idea, at least. Now, of course, one may argue on the merits of such compensation or the end idea itself, but if you wish to address such a debt plan, feel free to do it on the videos themselves and the whole idea behind it, which is a bit of pain now, or let's face it, a lot of pain now, to avoid even more pain in the future. This compensation is basically a way to put a tourniquet on that and limit the bleeding that comes from the plan itself, while allowing us to successfully survive until it heals up naturally and, in the case of the debt plan, pay off the debt, which can eventually be used to build up to my other big plan, which involves the abolition of taxation. Again, it has its own video. Address it there if you disagree. But this compensation is basically a requirement to sustain the plan itself. Would it have issues? Potentially. I won't deny that, and guarantee you we're going to have a recession, no matter what. Will it be a long one? I would have my doubts, especially given that the loss of the expenditures and the increase of taxation is being made up with increased spending in technicality. Because remember, when you go to the debt, people own that debt. Someone actually holds a receipt that says, debt to federal government so-and-so amount. And so, the federal government paying that off is necessarily, in doing so, putting more money back into the economy. And likely into the pockets of bankers or investors who can basically take the economy and immediately invest back into it under the logic of, hey, if the debt's getting paid off, well then, that's a whole lot less strain on the economy and a whole lot of room for us to invest later. And so, they would be very beneficial. Now, another thing that would help with the debt plan would, of course, be lower interest rates, but that cannot be guaranteed. I mean, theoretically, we could negotiate with big banks and basically give them, or rather ask them for loans at a cheaper rate, say 0.5%, to basically consolidate and restructure the debt so we can pay it off quicker. Would they agree? Not guaranteed. It would just be very helpful and more efficient. Which, of course, plenty of them might well agree just on the basis of, hey, this helps the federal government, and if it helps the federal government, we're guaranteed to get rich off the back of it, so let's do it. And of course, let's face it, 0.5% on a debt that's over $30 trillion I think it's close to 40 trillion now. It's like 38. Would be still a lot of money, which I doubt they'd scoff at. Plus, 5-year loans ain't too bad. But the whole plan, again, relies on the economy being stable. Such compensation, along with the low interest rate loans and any other actions taken to ensure that the economy continues to function normally, will be necessary to ensure it goes smoothly. Because again, this plan relies on a GDP that is strong. And by attaching not only the IRAs, but the taxation level to GDP, it means that GDP fundamentally is important for everyone. In the case of your retirement, that's the IRAs. In the case of the government, that's how much you raise to pay off the debt. So GDP go up isn't just economics talk for look at the line go up, like a lot of people view it as currently. It'll be fundamentally important for both government policy and individual retirements, and just their lives in general. So it won't be just some nebulous thing. It'll be important to everyone. That is all. Thank you for watching. I do hope you enjoyed, and feel free to comment on this.